Hey, I'm Monica Weber with Boulder Office of Disaster Management, and this video goes over your quick guide for making a disaster preparedness plan. So to jump on in, the first thing that we want to consider when you're thinking about your own personal plan for either yourself or your household is these two components, making sure that your plan is both actionable, so something that you can realistically carry out, and then sustainable, meaning that it lasts for a duration of time that isn't just a quick blip, but rather something that can sustain over the amount of time that you might need to evacuate or shelter in place. So with those two things in mind, we're going to go over three main components of creating a plan, which are communication, evacuation, and creating a grab list. And while you could go above and beyond this, add extra components in, we really encourage folks, start with a nice base plan with these key things that are going to be easier for you to remember than some long, elaborate multi-page plan. If you can really dial in the components that you think of as we go through this video and content, that's going to be easy for you to recall and then put into action in those stressful times of disaster. So we're going to jump into communication first. And when we think about communication, this is both receiving information, but then also transmitting information, contacting others to share our own status or other updates with them, right? So the first thing we want to do is make sure that we're getting informed. And this is done through a variety of ways. In Boulder County, we're really lucky in that we have a really robust emergency alert system. And so if you visit boulderodm.gov, there's a whole bunch of information about how you can get those emergency alerts, or we've got another video that goes over different types of alerts that's linked in the description below. So check that out if you're interested and want to check out a video format, but get signed up for those alerts. The next thing we want to think about is how you're going to stay informed. So alerts really help us get that initial kind of aha moment that something's going on. But then to stay informed, both with things that are happening in our community, but then also with loved ones, folks that we care about, we want to make sure that we've got good communication plans for, okay, where am I going to go to kind of vet out information or gather more? Our website can be a really good spot for that. Local news sources, other places that you rely on that are easy to access for you can be really great. But then also keeping our loved ones informed of our status and things that they might need from us is a really critical part of communication. And also making sure that we do a lot of this planning and that we share our plan and communicate that with the folks that are involved in it ahead of time before we hit that disaster phase. So next, with communication, we want to think about how we're going to power devices. Many of us, right? You have a cell phone. This might be your primary mode of communication. And with that, it's not too useful if it doesn't have battery anymore, right? So figuring out how we plan to power the devices that we use, whether that's a cell phone, any other type of device, to make sure that we've got that connectivity there. So that might be having a backup battery source. That might be having, like I personally have, just a charger that can hook into my car that I can utilize as well. So thinking about what works for you and your current situation in a way that makes sense. So powering those devices, also having key contacts. Many of us, I would say, probably store a lot of our contacts in our phones. So just think for a minute, how many phone numbers can you right now recall without having to check a phone book, your phone contacts, any of that? It's probably maybe one, maybe two, three if you're really good, but most of us nowadays have kind of really diminished our ability to remember phone numbers because we don't have to, because we rely a lot on technology. So with key contacts, thinking about how you might choose to save those in a way that aren't just in an electronic device. So that could be a little physical phone book you keep around. That might be using just a little paper that you write up or print out and keep in your wallet or somewhere else safe that's got important folks that you would want to get in touch with should there be a disaster, to where if your phone flies out your window, drops down some kind of storm drain, just the power dies on it, you've got a way to be able to borrow a phone, get to another device, and be able to communicate with folks. So that's really important. And then one last little thing just to store in your back pocket is thinking about texting versus calling. And this can be really helpful because in a disaster, what do we often do? We pick up the phone and want to call the folks that we care about to see, are you okay? Here's where I'm at. Here's how this is all going. Sometimes that allows for dropped calls because the cell towers get way overloaded because everyone's doing that same thing. So a thing to consider if you're having trouble keeping a call maintained is just shoot a text over if you have that capacity to do so, because that's a one-way communication. It can get folks the information they might need to know that you're okay or know where you're at, or know that you need their assistance. but it doesn't then have to maintain that connection like a call would. So just a tool to have that might help you out with communication. Next, we're going to talk about evacuation, and two main things to think about in this realm. The first of which is transportation and how you're actually going to evacuate, what modes or methods you might take. And so that could be a personal vehicle, that could be grabbing a ride with a neighbor or a friend, that could be a whole variety of things. We really encourage folks, assess your situation, assess what's going on in your life, what resources you have, and find a primary way that you would get transportation, and then a backup way. So that could be a neighbor that you've talked with ahead of time that you know, great, if my car for whatever reason doesn't work, won't start, I'm going to contact them. They're going to be my ride, and they know that. So they know to kind of check with me before they take off, right? With transportation, another key thing to note is that oftentimes public transportation, if you rely on that, doesn't always work in the same way that it would, because things might get rerouted or just shifted other places to help with disaster evacuation. So knowing to really try as much within your control to get kind of personal contacts that might help you evacuate. And these can be non-traditional modes as well. We once had a session and one of the participants said that he was pretty convinced, like, he didn't have a way to get a ride with anyone else, but he bought himself a motorized scooter, and that was how he was going to get out, because he didn't feel good about having to walk out, didn't feel like he had anyone. So we encourage you, have a primary, but have a secondary. And even if it's non-traditional, that's great. That's thinking creatively and making sure that you're going to have options for how you're going to evacuate out of an area, right? And something to think about with transportation, with evacuation that comes up is garages. This is a really critical point, where if you've got a garage, an important thing to know is when the power goes down, your garage is no longer going to manually open itself, right, with that push of a button. So two ways or two things to think about with this. The first of which is the center photo on this slide, which is a hand kind of grabbing a red pull tab in the garage. And that's something that's attached to your garage power box. And if you pull that, that then kind of releases the system, and then you can manually open your garage door. One caveat to that is you have to be able to physically lift that door up. So it might be a two-person job. So just assess that as you think about using that as an option. Another route to go if you think, shoot, I don't think I have the ability to lift that door on my own. I live by myself. What would I do? Maybe that's where you consider moving your vehicle out into a driveway or just outside of a garage if there's high concern days. So days where it's maybe really high winds, we have a really heavy winter storm coming in, things like that. So you can just shift your normal habits so that you have a workaround for that should there be any kind of power loss. So just something to think about. And then with routes, we want you to think about not just your normal routes, because many of us, I know I do this, I drive to work and I take pretty much the same way every day. And without thinking about it, I just arrive in our parking lot and here I am. So as you make your plans, really start to think about what are other ways you can take to go to and from places that you frequent often, right? So whether that's school, home, work, a grocery store, community center, other places, start to explore what those things are in your neighborhood so that in the event that there's routes that you typically take that are cut off or impacted due to a disaster, you've got kind of in the back of your mind already a good habit of, great, I know I can take South Boulder Road and head over this way and still get to where 36 might normally take me, right? So just start to think about that, explore that, and get familiar with your area. So that's a bit about evacuation, and then rounding us out for our plan, we want to have a grab list. And this is a bit of a shift from things like a Go kit that you might have heard of in the past. Go kits are still really great and really valuable to have. And they traditionally have things that are kind of those traditional emergency supplies. So things like a weather radio, a flashlight, maybe backup, power batteries, clothing, food, things that can help kind of sustain your well-being. But what grab or go bags don't account for, rather, is those kind of personal items, things that might have high level of importance to you. So to get to that, we talk about grab list, and on your grab list, you want to have the 7 Ps. Some of these might be really straightforward and some you might not have thought of before. So we'll go through them. The first P being people. You want to make sure that you get your folks and plan for those folks that you care about, and even the ones that you don't, take them with you. Get them out so that you all can get to safety, right? So that's number one priority always. Secondly, we want to think about pets and how we're going to get pets out, also what we're going to take for our pets, right? And so making sure that we've got food, water, leashes, other things that they will need for their well-being to come on with us. The next P is papers, and this isn't just random papers that you have floating around, but rather important documents, things that you would want to take. That could be IDs, that could be deeds to items, other components of paperwork that you'd want to take. The next P is prescriptions. With that, it doesn't just have to be prescription medication, but things like eyeglasses or medical devices that you use that are really important to take with you, again, to just maintain that well-being and help in a stressful situation, not have added stressors that compound, right? So make sure to grab those things, have them on your grab list. The next P is priceless items. So that could be things like photos, family heirlooms, kids stuff, other things that have a high level of just importance to you personally from either a sentimental value, those types of things, adding them to your grab list. And then the last two, rounding it out, are personal computers. So that's if you have a computer, maybe you have stuff backed up on a drive, you want to grab that and take it with you, add that to your list. And then plastic, which doesn't mean gather up your recyclables. Rather, it means fits into the P, kind of mnemonic, but have a way to pay for things. So plastic being a credit card of some kind, right? Or cash if you'd like, but that doesn't fit into the 7 Ps too well. So that's a grab list. And again, this is a list of items. We'll go over an example here of what the item is what's on this list on the left-hand side, and then the right-hand side has the location. And so the way this example list is set up is the top items that this person wants to take, they're shaded in blue, and there's a note about that at the bottom. But the top of the list has their dog, the leash and harness for their dog, photos, jewelry box, and a purse, right? And then it's got the location for all of those. Then as we go down the list, that's got other items throughout their house in its location. And that's just to help folks, again, in those moments of stress when we have disasters hit and you get that notice of you've got to evacuate. Your brain sometimes isn't functioning the way that we might think that it would normally, right? You might be very composed normally, really organized, but then that stress hits and all of a sudden you're like, I've grabbed socks and a bag of beef jerky, and that's probably not all that you want to take with you, right? So having this list really helps you to be able to hone in on what are those important items that I've identified ahead of time and where are they, so that those stressors don't then compound and you're like, I can't find it, I'm just going without it, right? So that can be really helpful. Another way that a grab list is super helpful is that if you are not home, if you have someone that has a key or access to your home and they're already in that area, right? It might be a neighbor or a friend close by. They could potentially go by. If you tell them, hey, this list is posted in my kitchen cupboard, great, they can go take a look at it and at least grab a couple of these things that might be really important to you, right? Or if you've just got less responsible members of your household, you're the responsible one that created the list, you're not home, they can gather up these things and still get them out and have them going. So that's one of the ways this can be really helpful, and you can get as elaborate or not as you want with this, right? And have every member of the family make one if you'd like to. That way, adults, children, everybody's got items that might be important to them. So that rounds out the grab list. And then just a couple of other additional considerations that we want to think about are access and functional needs, thinking both for ourselves, but also for folks that we know. Consider that, knowing that if someone has access and functional needs, there might be extra time to mobilize needed. So just taking that into account, we really encourage folks, if you need extra time to mobilize for any reason, leave it the warning phase if possible, rather than waiting for that evacuation order. Another thing we want to think about is time and place. So while your plan might be one thing for if it's a midday on a Tuesday, how does that shift if it's Saturday night, right? And so thinking about where are other members of your household, access to your transportation, etc., and how that might shift your plans. And then lastly, we touched on them a little bit during the grab list, but thinking about pets and how we go ahead and make sure to account for them. Also remembering that just like we get stressed, our pets and animals may be as well. And so making sure that even if we have, let's say, a dog that's wonderful off leash, they're always very calm, very friendly, they might get really skittish or more aggressive or things like that. That goes for any animal, not just dogs, but making sure to take into account, making sure that we're leashing them up, creating our animals in a way that we know we can keep them safe and keep our stress levels as low as possible as well. So that's a little bit on preparedness and creating your preparedness plan. For more information, check out boulderodm.gov/preparedness and be sure to contact us with any questions. Thanks for watching.